Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio. WestchesterTalkRadio.com, produced by Sharc Creative. Made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built, by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk. Also by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard, and by Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Kisco. Here on the Beat in Westchester, I'm John Marino, and we are joined by Siena College pollster Steve Greenberg, Siena College, Siena Research Institute, outside Albany. Steve, welcome back. Here we are. It is primary New York round one coming up, a few days away, when we vote for governor and the assembly, the state senate, of course, and Congress now at the end of August after the Hochul mandate got thrown out and redone by the courts and a special master. You've run up at Siena quite interesting set of polls and questions you put out there just in time for primary round number one. First of all, we talk and we see what happened in Buffalo. We see what happened in Uvalde, Texas, and Oklahoma, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, other incidents like this, gun incidents around the country. You got some interesting gun control numbers in New York, which has already been one of the most stringent gun control states.
Yeah, well, I mean, we should make it clear that the poll we're talking about, John, even though we've come out close to the primary, is not a primary poll. It's not a poll of likely Democratic primary voters or likely Republican primary voters, but a look at where New York's registered voters are on a number of issues. So,
right. These are key issues that relate to what we will do on primary day. And I find it really interesting that we're talking about all of this just days before we go to the ballot box.
Absolutely. And guns, as you point out, a major issue. And we have talked in the past about issues that have a huge partisan divide or that divide New Yorkers. I got to tell you, the issue of guns is not one of those issues, John. We asked New Yorkers about a law that was passed at the end of session, signed by the governor, that would now require a permit for someone to get a semi-automatic weapon in New York. And that means being at least 21, going through a background check, taking a safety course. And we said, we asked voters, do you think this new law will be good for New York or bad for New York? More than 3/4, 76% of New Yorkers say this law will be good for the state. Only 14% say it will be bad. 8% said, well, not really sure, mixed. But what's really interesting, 83% of Democrats, 73% of independents, and 67% of Republicans all think this law will be good. Further, we broke it down. 73% of gun owners in New York think this law will be good for the state. It's not just a coincidence, and it's not just one question. We also asked about the upcoming, expected any day now, Supreme Court decision about a New York law, a law that's been on the books in New York for decades, which is that you have to have a license to carry a concealed handgun.
What we call open carry.
Exactly. And we asked voters, what do you think the Supreme Court should do? Should it uphold New York's requirement to have a license for concealed carry? Or would you like to see the Supreme Court overturn New York's law? 79-15. 79% of New Yorkers say they want the Supreme Court to uphold New York's concealed carry law. 82% of Democrats, 79% of Republicans, 77% of independents, 72% of gun owners. This is an issue, unlike many others, that really does unite the vast majority of New Yorkers.
Mm-hmm. I think if you took the same poll in Idaho, you might get some different numbers, but Supreme Court abortion ruling supposedly coming up about whether or not Roe v. Wade will now be put in the hands of individual states and scrapped from the federal level.
Right. And again, another Supreme Court decision expected any day before the term ends in a couple weeks. And we asked voters, do you think that the Supreme Court should uphold the Mississippi law which essentially prohibits abortions after 15 weeks, essentially overturning Roe v. Wade? Or would you rather see the Supreme Court uphold Roe v. Wade and throw this Mississippi law out as unconstitutional? 60% of New Yorkers want to see Roe v. Wade upheld by the Supreme Court. 24% of New Yorkers say they would like to see the Mississippi law upheld and Roe v. Wade be overturned. Here we have a partisan divide, but not as dramatic as some as we've seen in the past. 73% of Democrats, nearly three-quarters, want to see Roe v. Wade upheld by a 57 to 25% margin, better than 2-1. Independents want to see Roe v. Wade upheld. Republicans closely divided by a narrow 41 to 39% margin. A small plurality of Republicans say they would like to see Roe v. Wade upheld. There is a gender gap, but it's not overwhelming. 70% of women, 56% of men would like to see Roe v. Wade upheld by the Supreme Court.
Now, crime is becoming an even more major issue, it seems like, month by month around this state.
Absolutely. And, we asked voters a couple of questions: how concerned they are about crime in the state, how concerned they are about crime in their community, how concerned they are about being a victim of crime themselves. We asked it back in February and found very high numbers. The numbers have gotten slightly higher, but what we have seen for sure is that there's been no improvement. 92% of New Yorkers think that crime in the state is a serious issue. 63%, up from 60% in February, say it's a very serious issue. 65% of New Yorkers say crime in their community is a serious issue. 27%, same as it was in February, say it's a very serious issue. And right now, 60% of New Yorkers, 6 out of 10 New Yorkers, are concerned that they will be a victim of crime. 26%, quarter of all New Yorkers, feel that they are very concerned that they could be a victim of crime.
Mm-hmm. Now, this fits into the discussion about what direction we are heading in as a New York City region, as a state, and as a nation. One issue is, of course, inflation, the impact of the economy on everyday people and their lives. And the biggest issue, I think, with that right now is the gas situation, the suspension of the state gas tax, which, of course, now we find out that Joe Biden wants to institute on a federal level, too. But locally in New York State, what do we think about that?
Sure. Well, as you know, the governor and legislature passed a law that from June 1st, that began at the beginning of this month, June 1st, and goes through the end of the year, eliminating 16 cents of the New York State gas sales tax on gas. And we asked voters, do you think this gas tax suspension has had a noticeable impact on how much you have to pay for gas? Or really hasn't had a noticeable impact, but I'm glad the state did it? Or hasn't had a noticeable impact, and I wish the state hadn't done it? What we find is that 1 out of every 5 voters, 19%, say it's had a noticeable impact on what they're paying at the pump. The clear majority of New Yorkers, 55%, say really hasn't had an impact, but I'm glad that the state did it. And then we have 15% of New Yorkers who say, I wish we hadn't done it. So you have 74%, 3/4 of New Yorkers who are glad the state did it versus 15% who wish the state hadn't done it. But only 1/5, but to those 1/5 of voters, they're seeing a noticeable difference because of the state gas tax suspension.
Who knows? Next time around, you might have a question about what do people think about a federal gas tax suspension. Congress will weigh in on that, and we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. Steve Greenberg, Siena College pollster, Siena College outside Albany, the Siena Research Institute here on Westchester Talk Radio. The direction of New York State, where are we going? And maybe how fast are we getting there, too? Who knows, right?
Absolutely. Well, right now, New Yorkers are not thrilled with the direction of the state. Only 37% of New Yorkers think the state is headed on the right track. A majority, 51%, think we're headed in the wrong direction. Virtually no change from April, the last time we asked, when it was 36 right track, 52 wrong direction. But what's really interesting is how New Yorkers feel about the direction of the country right now. Only 25% of New Yorkers think the country is headed on the right track, compared to 68%, more than 2/3, who think the country is headed in the wrong direction. Back in April, that was 34-57. So underwater by 23 points back in April, but today underwater by 43 points.
As we move along and talk about the future of New York State, we do have our gubernatorial primary coming up in a few days. Look at the numbers from the Democratic and Republican standpoint, as you have been. I'm going to preface that by saying to you, a few nights back during a debate amongst the Republican candidates, the moderator said to Andrew Giuliani, let's be honest now, if your name weren't Giuliani, would you be here with us? Part one. And part two, I've seen a lot of your campaign literature and what you've put out. It all says vote for Giuliani, but it never says Andrew.
Yeah, well, I mean, candidates tend to use what works best for them. And right now, again, this is not a sample of likely Republican primary voters, but among Republicans in New York, 50% say they view Andrew Giuliani favorably, 28% say they view him unfavorably. In fairness to the moderator, he or she is right. There is no way that 78% of Republicans in New York have an opinion about Andrew Giuliani. They hear the name, they think the father. How do we know that? Because Lee Zeldin among Republicans, 36 favorable, 21 unfavorable. Rob Astorino, 32-12. Harry Wilson, 18-12. It's hard to get known in this state. These other three have been candidates before. Two of them have held elective office. One holds elective office now. Andrew Giuliani's never run for office in New York. He's never held office in New York. If his name was Andrew Smith, he would not get a 50-28 favorability rating.
And that moderator was Eric Bolling of Newsmax. And that all, to me, when I heard that, fell in line with everything you've talked about the past 6 months or so with the polling in the governor's race about how the name Giuliani makes the difference for Andrew Giuliani. And let's see what happens on Election Day at the polls. Will it make the ultimate difference? We shall see. Now,
I have to just intervene here 1 second, John, to make my urgent plea. All of you Democrats, all of you Republicans, get out and vote on Tuesday. I don't care if you're the leftist of the left, the rightist of the right, have your voice be heard. Vote on Tuesday. Independents, stay chill till November. We'll be back at you then.
As they say, don't complain if you don't vote. And that's the first thing I was thought about voting when I was 13 years old and said, why can't I vote now? I had to wait a few years. Sorry
so
to
you
say.
Complained instead.
Yeah, I did other things in the meantime. Like the independents, I stayed chill until my turn came to vote a few years after. Kathy Hochul on the Democratic side, how is she faring as we get towards primary day?
Well, among all voters, since she is the governor of the state of New York, we ought to take a look at that. 46% of all voters in New York view Hochul favorably. 37% view her unfavorably. 17% still don't know enough about her to have an opinion or have never heard of her. That 17 is the lowest it's been since she's been governor. Not surprising, particularly now that she's spending millions of dollars on TV commercials. But among Democrats, her numbers are particularly good. 65% of Democrats view Hochul favorably compared to 19% who view her unfavorably. Back in April, among Democrats, she was at 60-16. So up 5 points on the good side, up 3 points on the bad side, still net positive too. And she has nearly 2/3 of Democrats viewing her favorably. her opponents, Jumaane Williams, the public advocate of New York City, 40% view him favorably, 12% view him unfavorably among Democrats alone. And Congressman Tom Suozzi is not doing well with his fellow Democrats. 23% of Democrats have a favorable view of Suozzi, 22% have an unfavorable view.
And it's interesting because Suozzi has some money to spend. I'd say the last 3 months, not a day has gone by pretty much where I haven't gotten a robocall from Tom Suozzi or one of his people or someone who supports him saying, John, get out and vote for Tom in the primary on election day. So, yeah, well, I have a feeling those calls may not continue after the middle of next week. You know,
probably not.
Probably not. You talk about Governor Hochul. I think she's done a pretty good job getting the name Kathy Hochul out there. Your numbers show that. What was, if you recall now, what was the lowest point for Andrew Cuomo where people did not know who he was? Basically, I think the Hochul number was 17.
Never. I mean, look, Siena started polling in 2005. So we weren't polling during Andrew Cuomo's first run for governor, which was back in 2002. It is interesting to point out that both Andrew Cuomo and Andrew Giuliani first run for public office was governor of the state of New York. But when Andrew Cuomo first ran for governor, he was a household name, and not because he had been the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, because I would imagine most New Yorkers right now don't know their federal Secretary of Housing. But he was the son of a 12-year governor.
And he ran his father's first campaign back in 1982 for governor.
Absolutely. Although voters wouldn't have known that or paid attention to it. But he was a well-known entity because of his last name. And then he ran for governor, lost or was about to lose in the Democratic primary, so he pulled out at the last minute. And then he spent the next few years preparing to run for attorney general. The first time Siena polled on him was in 2005 when we started polling, started this, the polling of New York State voters. And he was already a well-known quantity in 2005. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but the don't know, no opinion, if it wasn't in the single digits, it was in the very low double digits, and that never changed. He's been a known quantity for 30, 40 years in New York.
Is Joe Biden's approval rating heading down into the single digits now?
Well, no, but it's not doing well. Right now, 49% of New Yorkers view Biden favorably, 46% view him unfavorably. You could say that's still good. He's above water. This is a state, as we've talked about, that has a better than 2-to-1 Democratic majority. So those numbers are not great. Although I will say among Democrats, he's still doing well. 73% of Democrats have a favorable view of Biden. The problem for Biden is that 85% of Republicans and 60% of independents view him unfavorably.
The key is really, in the end, I guess, the independents, right?
Look, a Democrat in New York statewide can win without winning independents because of that 2-to-1 enrollment advantage over Republicans. Let's not forget, there are more independents in the state of New York than there are Republicans. So in order for a Republican to win statewide, they have to win, if not the lion's share, certainly a strong majority of the independents if they're going to try and win statewide. And that's why it's so difficult for Republicans. And that's why no Republican has won statewide since George Pataki won his third term in 2002. No Republican other than Pataki has won statewide in New York since 1994. Dennis Vacco, 28 years.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But on a national scale, those independents are key. Not in the Northeast, but in the Midwest, in the South.
Oh, and they're key in New York, and they're certainly going to be. You talk to some of in those hotly contested congressional or state legislative races. For a lot of them, not in the primary, but in the general election, independent voters are going to be key.
Mm-hmm. Steve Greenberg, we thank you for all you've done leading up to our first primary day. Lots more to go during the summer. We'll talk. All right. Enjoy July 4th.
Thanks. You too.
And I know you're getting out to vote. So,
well, you don't know that I'm a Democrat or a Republican.
Either or, it doesn't matter. You're getting.
But
out
I
to
could
vote,
be an
right?
independent, and I could stay chill.
You could be, yes. All right. You'll vote if you are independent. You'll vote in your own mind.
Exactly.
There you go. Steve Greenberg here on Westchester Talk Radio. I'm John Marino, and we are produced by Sharc Creative here on the Beat in Westchester, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that Service built. Also by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk. Also by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth through a fiduciary standard, and by Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, Mount Kisco, and White Plains. Catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam and Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube, and we have an app now. Take it with you every place you go. Download it. It's called Westchester Talk.